The sun was setting behind the gated community when Marcus stepped out onto his porch. He had just poured himself a cup of coffee, the kind of quiet ritual that made him feel at peace in a neighborhood that hadn't always welcomed him. That's when he saw them. Two men in cheap tactical gear. Black shirts with CQRY stitched on crooked patches, shiny badges clipped to their belts like something ordered off Amazon. They weren't police, not even close. But they acted like it. One of them shouted up the driveway, "Mr. Williams, you're trespassing on HOA property. Pack your things. We're here to evict you." Marcus froze, his coffee trembling in his hand. Evict him? On land he owned outright? Marcus was a 42-year-old black entrepreneur who had worked his way up from nothing. Born and raised in Atlanta, he spent his 20s building a small construction company with his brothers. By his late 30s, that company had grown into a successful contracting business. He wasn't flashy, but he had pride in his work, in the homes he built, and most of all, in finally being able to buy one for himself in a quiet, tree-lined community on the edge of town. It was the kind of neighborhood where mailboxes all matched, lawns were trimmed like golf courses, and the homeowners association prided itself on being exclusive. But Marcus had learned quickly that exclusive meant something different here. Neighbors gave him looks, subtle at first. Some never waved back. Others muttered under their breath when he parked his work trucks in his own driveway. And then came the letters: HOA fines for grass that was half an inch too long for proper, paint colors on a backyard shed, even for the sound of his nephew's laughter when the kids played basketball too late. Marcus paid some fines, fought others. He kept his head down. But the hostility never faded. And behind it, there was something uglier, an unspoken belief that Marcus didn't belong. That afternoon when the fake HOA cops showed up, it was the culmination of weeks of threats. Flyers had been shoved under his door claiming he was violation of community standards. Anonymous notes told him to go back to where you came from. Marcus had ignored them. But this was different. Evict me, Marcus said, stepping down from his porch. You don't have that power. This is my deed, my property. You don't get to just. The bigger man cut him off. Sir, we're authorized by the HOA board. You either pack your things, or we'll make sure you're removed. Don't resist. Removed. The word echoed. Marcus could see his neighbors peeking through blinds, watching. Nobody came out. Nobody spoke up. It was just him and these men. Puffed up with false authority, he pulled out his phone. If you're really authorized, then you won't mind if I call the sheriff's department right now. The smaller man sneered. Phones don't change the rules. This neighborhood has standards. You don't fit. Simple as that. And that's when Marcus realized. This wasn't about fines or sheds or lawns. This was about power. About pushing him out by any means necessary. Just as the men started walking up the driveway, a rumble of engines cut through the tension. 6 pickup trucks rolled to a stop outside the gate. Doors slammed. Boots crunched gravel. Marcus looked up and felt a surge of relief he hadn't expected. It was his old crew, the men he'd hired years ago to help build his contracting business. But they weren't just builders. They were veterans, Navy SEALs who'd returned from deployments overseas and found steady work with Marcus when nobody else would hire them. And when they heard he was being harassed, they decided to pay a visit. The leader, a broad, shoulder-shouldered man named Connor, stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. Afternoon, gentlemen. Mind telling me what law you're enforcing here? The fake cop stiffened. This doesn't concern you. Show a business. Connor smiled slightly, but there was steel in his eyes. See, that's the thing. HOA doesn't outrank the U.S. Constitution. And last time I checked, this man owns his home. So unless you've got real badges and a court order, you're trespassing. The bigger man tried to bluster. We have authority? Connor cut him off. No, you don't. But we do have witnesses' cameras, and more than enough reason to call in the actual sheriff. So here's your choice: leave quietly, or get arrested for impersonating officers. Behind him, the other 5 SEALs stood like a wall, calm, disciplined, but unyielding. The kind of men who didn't need to raise their voices to be taken seriously. The fake cops faltered. Their bravado cracked. And in that silence, Marcus felt something shift. For the first time since moving in, he wasn't alone. Within minutes, the men retreated, muttering under their breath as they disappeared down the street. The blinds in nearby houses snapped shut. Connor turned to Marcus, clapping a hand on his shoulder. They won't be back, but if they try, we'll be here. That night, Marcus sat on his porch again. The coffee had gone cold, but he didn't mind. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of belonging, not because the HOA accepted him, but because real friends stood by him. The sheriff's department came later, confirmed the imposters had no authority, and opened an investigation into harassment. The HOA board denied involvement, of course. But the message was clear: intimidation only works if you stand alone. Marcus thought about the neighborhood, about the silent faces in the windows. Maybe they were too afraid to speak. Maybe they quietly agreed with the men who had tried to push him out. But it didn't matter anymore. He wasn't leaving. And more importantly, he wasn't fighting alone. This story isn't just about one man and a crooked HOA. It's about power, who wields it, and who resists it. It's about the ways communities can weaponize rules to exclude, to intimidate, to erase people who don't fit a narrow mold. But it's also about solidarity. Marcus didn't defeat injustice by himself. He did it because others stood with him, because loyalty, friendship, and courage outweighed intimidation. So the question for all of us is this: when we see injustice on our own streets, in our own neighborhoods, do we stay behind the blinds, or do we step forward? Marcus's story is a reminder: silence protects the aggressor. But solidarity, real human solidarity, protects us all. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it. Talk about it. Ask yourself what your own community looks like and how power is being used.